Hey YouTube, what's up? Welcome back to another video in the series where I try to start my own tech company and scale it to $1 billion tech unicorn. At least that's the plan. Let's see how it goes. Over the past week, I've been trying to work on the game part of the tech company that I'm building. It's sort of like an app, but it also has a game component to it. And I'm building that game in Phaser 3 in JavaScript because I don't know Unity and I don't know C++ or C#, whatever Unity is. But I do know JavaScript as a web engineer, and a large part of what I want to build is an app, and the game is just sort of part of that. Phaser 3 made a lot of sense. Regardless, last week I got to the point where I was loading a level onto the screen, and I had a character who was walking around, and I added some character animations. So a game isn't much worth without some interactivity to it. So my goal for this week was to get a rudimentary MVP level of interaction for that character that was on the screen and had animations. So I thought the best way to do this was to add some bushes, and when your character attacks, you chop those bushes. All right, so taking a look at my screen here, the program that I have up is called Tiled. It is the map editor that I'm using to build the levels for my game. And you can see here the test map file that I created and was using last week. I mentioned that the file was really big accidentally. So I've gone ahead and added some bushes here. I added a bush layer above my grass and fence layer, and you can see that all these sort of blue squares are bushes. Now, I tried to export this and then bring it into my application, and when I did so, the bushes did not appear, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why. But eventually what I realized was that the tile set that I was using, I mentioned before, is the Zelda-like tile set. It comes downloadable from itch.io in several different pieces, and what I was actually using as a tile set was just the overworld section of that tile set. They also have like a city and caves and some other stuff, and what the bush that I was actually referencing was in this other tile set called objects, and you can see it's right here. So I imported that objects tile set and then just added these bushes and expected it to, populate. And what I found out, jumping into the code here, maybe jumping ahead a bit, this is the test scene, which is the scene for that I'm loading. And where I'm making this map is right here on lines 52 and 53, or at least that's where I was. And you can already sort of see the code, how I've changed it. But before, this was referencing the Zelda-like tile set. And what I had to do using Texture Packer was pack a new tile set where I'm taking those separate pieces such as objects, caves, cities, and the overworld and putting it into one tile set. And that also meant that I needed to change how I was loading that tile set in my preloader scene. So as Phaser loads, the first thing it does is loads the preloader first, and that's going to load your images just to make things go a little bit faster. Ideally, that's like during a loading screen or maybe a character select screen where the user is distracted with other things and we're loading a more intense process in the background. So here, after I packed the tile set, I'm importing that packed tile set instead of just the overworld. And then what I realized is that instead of using this test map that I've been using and referencing two different tile sets or more, which became very complicated, I just decided to use that newly packed tile set that I created to create a new test map. I mentioned the old one was really big, and this is the new one. So now you can see in the bottom right of Tiled, the tile set looks a little bit differently because it's all packed onto one page, and there's extra stuff in here. There's some inside stuff for houses, in addition to like some bricks for castles, and you can see my little bush is right down here. So I went in and took my bush and my box and painted a bunch of tiles on a much smaller map, and added some new fences. So this is a new and improved test map, if you will, and saved that and exported that. And from what you just saw of the code, now I am bringing in that testmap2.json, and I'm keeping the same key here of testmap. And what I learned was that when you're calling this map.addTilesetImage, this first argument that you're passing in, what I'm calling packed tileset, I spent like an hour or two trying to figure out why this wasn't working, because I thought it was just a key that you're associating with your code, and when you create the layers, you just reference that key. You can see lower down, I think I did that, line 1, maybe I moved that. Here we go. So what's new here, lines 63 to 72, I was referencing, here I was passing in like a string called Zelda-like, and I thought that that just needed to match the string that I was passing into this addTilesetImage function, but actually that correlates to the map data that's coming in from tiled, because it embeds in the JSON object, and it actually has to match what you name your tile set when you bring that into tiled. So kind of a tough learning experience there, some wasted time, but it's all good. Once I figured out how to reference that correctly, my map started showing up correctly. It felt like a major win. And then after bringing that tile set in, I needed to handle the new layers that I added for bushes and boxes. So in my map, I'm creating a new constant here on line 65 called map layer, where I'm creating, previously this just was map.createLayer, and I'm assigning that to a variable now. And if the layer is bushes or boxes, I'm adding that map layer to an interactive layer group, which I'm instantiating on line 51. I'm saying const interactive layers equals this.add.group, which is like a game objects group. And on line 70 here, I'm adding a collider for the hero sprite and that map layer. So now that there is a collider for the hero sprite and that map layer, what needs to happen is there needs to be a floating rectangle that's permanently in front of my character that we can detect when that rectangle, which is essentially like a hitbox for like where my character is swinging his sword, we need to be able to detect when that rectangle is over top of our bush or our box, and then do something when there is a collision there. I'm handling that logic on line 93. I'm creating this utility function in another file called create interactive game object, and it's going to take in the reference to this scene, the hero sprite's X and Y position, the size of the rectangle that you're creating, or the game object, I should say, that you're creating, and I think a keyword here, I'm not sure, but we can pop over to our utility file and find out. So it's right here, game utils. You can see these are all my changes for the week. So this code is actually, I should say, it's from pablo.gg. I've been looking at his top-down React phaser template that he made for the phaser game that he added to his blog. It's been incredibly helpful to be able to read his blog posts and also look at the code that he wrote and kind of learn from that and model my code after it and hopefully improve it a little bit. So I saw his utility function, and this is incredibly similar, where I'm pulling in the scene XY, the width and the height, and the name, I guess. So, and instead of attack, maybe this should be like floating rectangle or hitbox or something. Regardless, that is the utility function that I'm using to create a rectangle. But once that rectangle gets created, we still need to move it with our character. So you can see I'm doing that on line 106 to line 138. That interactive game object that I created, I'm saving to this hero action collider, and then I'm creating an update function on that collider, and then when that updates, we're getting the facing direction and just sort of changing the position of that rectangle based on our hero's position. Then we're calling that update function much lower here in our update function. You can see on line 204, this.hero action collider update. So now we've got bushes on our map that is possible, hopefully, for us to cut down, and an action collider that will exist over top of that bush. And now we need to listen for a keystroke, and then when a character attacks while that box is hovering over a bush, we need to do something. So I'm handling that just above that here. On line 172, I put it underneath my grid engine subscriptions. So I'm adding an overlap in our physics engine for the hero action collider and our interactive layer group that I created earlier, and then added both the bush layer and the box layer too. Inside of that overlap function, we need a way to grab just the tiles. So we're creating, it takes in two arguments, object A and object B, and then we're retrieving the tiles from those by putting them inside of an array and then using a .find helper method. So once we have our tile, and you can see a little red squiggly line here, I still need to add typing for this, one of many things I need to do when I go in and clean up all this code, but we're grabbing our tile, and then we're creating a switch statement based off of the name of that tile. And if it is bushes, I'm kind of ignoring boxes for now, and maybe that will be next week's video. But if it is bushes, we're checking if our player is attacking. And if is attacking is set to true, we add a delayed call here. So this is 50 milliseconds, which is hopefully enough time for the animation to fire. And then we're setting that tile to be invisible, and then we're destroying it. And that's pretty much all of the code changes that I made this week. Most of that exists inside of my test scene file. Of course, also here on the left, you can see my total changes. I added like another test map. My TMJ file probably shouldn't be in there, but I have a JSON, an additional JSON file, and then added a new packed tile set. So now I have duplicate tile sets, duplicate test levels, which I will need to go in and clean up again. And of course my game utils file, and I edited the preloader in the test scene. But you can see on the bottom of my screen here, I've got a terminal, I've got this running. So let's take a look at it. So opening up Chrome here, this is localhost/my game, and you can see my character has appeared on the screen, and the animation still works, but now you can see there's a floating box that exists in front of him, and that's the hero action collider that we created. And the hero action collider can pass over objects that the hero would collide with, such as these fences, or maybe this box over here. But it doesn't do anything. You can still swing your sword at those, but nothing happens. However, when you encounter a bush, when the hero action collider is over top of one of these bush tiles, you can swing your sword and it destroys the bush. So right now, this is basically bush cutting simulator, but I'm hoping to add more interactivity to the game over coming weeks. It's a slow and steady process. This was a lot of work to even get this far because, again, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm really just looking at code from other people's repositories on the internet and trying to understand how that code works. Reading blog posts. Earlier I mentioned the blog post from Pablo GG. I will try to link that in the description. Very, very helpful. But I'm just trying to read from those and teach myself. And it's a slow process, but it's pretty rewarding once you're able to figure it out and get something to work. And I'm proud of the progress I'm making so far, and I just got to keep going. So I will continue to do that. Thanks for watching and following along. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. If you liked the video, please feel free to like it. Any support helps. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.